Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Fireside Chat with Sushmita Narayana. She is a professor at the National Institute of Industrial Engineering, applying artificial intelligence to optimize supply chains. Her work impacts several fields such as education, aviation, and makes our world more sustainable. Welcome, Ms. Narayana. Thank you for joining us today. You're working in a very unique field that many of us don't always hear about or know about, but we're part of it all the time. Like when we buy anything that's from a store or we order anything online. Can you tell us a bit about what supply management is and your work applying artificial intelligence and machine learning to it?
Yeah, thank you, Arundhati. So, supply chain management is not a very unique field. It is a part of business, and it's interesting because it's a combination of several disciplines. So, we have at the core of it is business, which is trade and supply and demand management between entities. And around it, we have other disciplines such as mathematics of how do we price products, how much do we supply, how much do we order, where do we stock, how much do we stock, right? So these are the mathematical questions that we try to delve into when we deal with supply chains. But this is one part of the discipline. There is also the economics of it. That is how our price is set when the supply is more than the demand, when the demand is more than the supply, so on and so forth. There are human issues over here. There are people issues. How are you going to organize labor and manpower in order to carry out tasks such as loading and unloading of trucks, so on and so forth. So there are human issues over here as well. And there are issues related to finance. There are issues related to the environment. So it is a combination of several disciplines, in fact. But the cool part of it is supply chain management is about connecting several entities together. It started off with as simple as, a farmer trying to sell some of his products to his neighbor in return for some other produce. So that's a very simple supply chain example. But as civilization has grown, people start looking at getting products from other nations, other regions, other villages, right? So in essence, the consumer nowadays wants to buy and consume products from a place which is very different from his location. So, a few years back, nobody had heard of, let's say, baby corn. But nowadays, baby corn is everywhere in all the food that you eat. You did not have Colombian coffee, but you have it everywhere. You go to a Starbucks restaurant, you get different kinds of coffee flavors over there. And this is all happening because supply chains are present and are getting more and more connected by the day. So it is an interesting field, but it's not a unique field per se. It has a lot of dynamics to it, because there are different ways and different ways in which consumers can behave and demand products, different ways in which entities along the supply chains can behave. So when I say entities would refer to manufacturers, suppliers, stockists, your retailers, let's say your Walmart, D-Mart, Kirana stores. All of these are examples of entities within a supply chain. And then you have government regulations also to adhere to. So those are the other entities who are regulating activities within the supply chain. And then you have larger international bodies like the WTO, so on and so forth, which are regulating how international trade happens, right? So there are various aspects to the supply chain, which makes it very, very interesting, but it is there all around us. So it makes sense to look at it and to research it and also to study about it, because it is important for the economy. For an economy to grow, it should have robust supply chains. It has been, declared by, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, by US President Biden, that supply chains were very important during the pandemic. And we started looking at how do we become more self-sufficient? How do we start looking at creating more resilient and robust supply chains? This became a focus of most nations because this is becoming the crux of developing or keeping the economy going.
If I can just follow up, what are the applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning to supply and demand?
Yeah, so like I said, there is a lot of mathematics that gets applied in supply chain management. And one of the reasons because is that we have a lot of decisions to take in supply chains. Like I said, where do you stock? How much do you order? What do you price? And these decisions can be very simple, or they can get very, very complex. They can get very complex mainly because there is a huge amount of variability that happens along the supply chain. consumers want a product today, they might be interested in a certain kind of apparel today, and that goes out of fashion very quickly. Similarly, consumers may change their location themselves, right? They might shift from one place to another. They might move out from one place to another. So demand shifts, demand keeps moving. Now, if you need to actually keep track of this, it's very difficult to do so if you were to manually keep track of this information, because this is very important information for you to create any kind of plan for your resources. That is where you want to produce, how much do you want to produce, what do you want to produce. So in such cases, we start looking at mathematics. We start looking at how can we analyze the information that we get. And this is assuming that we have enough information about the entities around us, right? So this is where something called as point of sales data becomes very, very important. That is when you go to a shop and you purchase something, there is a bill that is produced, and that is a proof of the transaction happening. So this is called point of sales data. Nowadays, everything is electronic. You can purchase things online, and there is an electronic proof of what you have purchased. And this data is very important to mine. This data is very important to understand in terms of what kind of trends are there, and how should even products be packaged and given to the consumer. This can be very important information. And this is where applications of AI ML come into picture, because they help us understand what kind of patterns could be there. You have algorithms such as clustering algorithm, classification algorithm, supervised learning, unsupervised learning. All of these can actually be applied to the data that you are getting or generating in order to create some understanding of the structure which is there in the demand side. Same thing you can also apply on the supply side also, because you can face variabilities even in the supply side. There could be some kind of a disaster that happens in some place of the world, which is going to impact your supply chain. And if you wanted to predict the possibility that a disaster is going to happen, or a possibility that there is going to be a pandemic and hence there is going to be some shutdown of facilities, you might want to look at using these algorithms in order to create predictions of what the event is going to look like. And with the use of this information, then you can start building plans. Then you can start creating plans as to when should you be starting your production, when should you be starting your deliveries, and how should you be hiring people. Maybe you should be looking at ways of engaging people in a better way. Maybe it could impact the way you advertise your products. So all of this information can come through once we have started analyzing or understanding the patterns of the data which is available with us. So this is with the assumption, like I said, that a lot of data is available. Sometimes data is not very, very good quality also. In such cases also, we can apply to some extent simulations using AI ML, and we can create some understanding of what is going to happen, what scenarios are going to be present, and then prepare for the worst case scenarios, and then create our plans accordingly. So this is where AI ML actually comes in, because we need to understand what are the patterns. And a very simple example I could think of, very popular example of AI ML applications in supply chains is the use of clustering algorithms. So if you have to do the deliveries, let's say Amazon needs to do deliveries to the end customer, right? Your last mile delivery, as we call it. Now, Amazon has to now decide what is the best way to send out the delivery agent so that they're able to meet all the customers and come back for the day, right? In this case, what they could do is they could cluster the region into different populations of people, and they can send out different delivery agents to different clusters. So by doing so, what they would be doing is they would be able to allocate certain capacities of trucks to one particular region. They will also be able to allocate products to one particular region, people to one particular region, and the resources get planned accordingly. And by doing so, you may be able to reduce your per unit cost of transport. So this is an example of application. There are many such other examples which we see in supply chain. It's a very, it's a very upcoming and growing field as such.
Thank you. It seems like this field has a really huge global impact. So how did you discover your interest in artificial intelligence, and when did you realize its application in the sustainable chain management industry?
Okay, so I am an engineer. I started off with a degree in production engineering, and then I moved on to IIM Kozhikode for the PhD program in quantitative methods and operations management. So that's where we get exposed to more advanced techniques of operations research. So my interest has been in the domain of operations research, which is basically the collection of several tools and techniques that are used to analyze and come to best solutions for a particular problem of interest for us. And artificial intelligence is, an interest which has come off late for me because of the vast amount of data which is available today. But the core of it, I would say, it's still operations research, where we try to understand the theory behind finding the best solution. So we have techniques like linear programming, non-linear optimization. These are techniques that, I have studied actually during my engineering also. We had a subject called engineering mathematics, which you would also have had. I'm sure that you would have been looking at how to carry out differentiation and find out the first order differential equation, find out solutions, find out if they're the best solutions or not, so on and so forth. So this was the foundation of it, but then we moved on to more advanced techniques where we apply nonlinear and linear programming techniques to the data which is present with us and try to find out the best solutions. Artificial intelligence and machine learning has become more important nowadays because sometimes the techniques that we have been using in operations research are not fast enough. Okay, so we need techniques to be quick, we need solutions to be quick. And you might not always want the best result. You might want a good enough result within, quite fast, right? So this might be a requirement for you. If you have to take daily decisions, you might need quick solutions. And you might want your programs to become more independent of you as a person. You might want them to run independent of you. So this is where concepts like artificial intelligence and machine learning come into place, where they can supplement the kind of work which is happening in operations research, which is more robust in the sense of finding solutions, but it takes more time. So this has happened over the last few years, where operations researchers and data scientists have started understanding that there are limitations to some of the techniques that we already know, and we need to supplement them with more robust techniques like artificial intelligence and machine learning. My interest in artificial intelligence and machine learning is more recent, I would say, compared to a lot of enthusiasts that we have these days. I have begun understanding the tools and techniques, and I have started teaching this to our students. And now I'm slowly applying it in various research domains and seeing how useful it is. So that's where I am right now.
That sounds absolutely amazing. One of the most interesting things about AI is that you can apply it to so many fields. And you've done two really cool projects. One is in education, using technology to improve the supply chain of early grade textbooks to Nagaland. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So this is a project which is actually a big team effort, which is driven by the World Bank. And I was part of a research team within the World Bank, where we were looking at understanding what were the problems with respect to textbook supply chains in Nagaland. Now, Nagaland is the part of the northeast of the country, and it has a hilly terrain, a very, very hilly terrain, and it's difficult to, commute through the state. And we have several public schools that are spread across the entire state of Nagaland. And in some cases, these schools are very, very far off and in remote locations. Now, one of the main requirements for children is for them to get educated is that they have textbooks with them. If you don't have a textbook, you would also have seen that it is much easier if you have a textbook in front of you to study rather than asking you to read a PDF file from the internet. And for young kids in Nagaland, it is more important, and for anyone for that matter, it's more important that in their formative years, they have access to textbooks when they're studying. And one of the issues that is being faced in a region like Nagaland is because of the terrain, the distribution of textbooks becomes difficult to these remote public schools because they're located very far off and they might not have enough students. So what happens is when you need to send textbooks to these schools, either the government or even any entities in between, they might say that it's not worth it to send the textbook all the way to the school. So what they do is they ask the teachers to instead come and pick up the textbooks from somewhere in between. Now we wanted to address, or we wanted to understand two specific problems. One was if there was a possibility that students were not receiving their textbooks at all, and hence, the purpose of education is lost. So this was not an application of artificial intelligence, but this is what we call as field experiments, and where we try to see on the field whether certain phenomenon is occurring or not. And what we were trying to see is whether the children were not receiving their textbooks. So what we did was we actually followed the textbooks from the point that they reached Nagaland. We followed the textbooks through the trucks, when they were loaded onto the trucks, when they were taken to the various blocks which are closer to the schools. And finally, when they reached the school also, we tracked whether the book has finally reached the school. And a team was deployed in order to carry out this research exercise and this study. And we did a simple statistical analysis of whether there was any shortage of books which was happening at the school level, and could that be attributed to any challenges in distribution. So the good news is that there is no such pilferage or loss of textbooks. However, there are issues with respect to planning, with respect to dispatch, with respect to unloading, that we are still trying to rectify within the textbook supply chain. And that is where we are looking at whether we can bring in any kind of technology into the entire process. So if a school teacher has to ask for textbooks, right now they have to go through various tiers in order to say that they want X number of textbooks for the year. And there are issues with this as well, because when you're looking at government schools, and this is not a Nagaland specific issue, across India, we see this issue that there is in remote corners or villages, we see a lot of dropout which happens, right? School kids will join the school, but they drop out. And they might come back in after 2 years again, and that's a very common phenomenon. And when that happens, it's very difficult to create an assessment of what is the demand for textbooks. So you have to create some rough estimates, and sometimes the rough estimates might be very, very wrong, in the sense you might be underestimating, so you will not send textbooks, and you could be overestimating, so you would send excess textbooks. So it's okay to send excess textbooks, you could put it in the library, but the underestimation is the issue that could be a problem. So this is where we are working with a team in order to create some kind of a technology visibility for the school textbooks, where the teachers can indicate how many books they want, what is the kind of dropout which is happening. And this information is collated at an aggregate level to create estimates of the demand for the books. That's one part of technology. Another part of technology that we are trying to see is whether we can apply these new things that we are seeing in supply chains. Nowadays, it's very common when you purchase a book online or you purchase any product online, when the delivery boy comes to your home, they are going to scan the barcode or the QR code. This is a very common thing to do. So whether we can use any of these technologies within the supply chain so that there is perfect visibility of consignments as they go along to the final, to the school and the school children. So this is what we're trying to see now, how we can implement all of this. And it is still under development. And I'm sure it is going to bring in a lot of benefits in terms of planning and support for the government of Nagaland.
That sounds like it's going to make a really big difference. The other really interesting project you're working on is in aviation, optimizing with AI in the aviation industry. So could you share a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. So commercial aviation is what I'm looking at, which is, airlines like Indigo, Tata's, Vistara, all of these airlines, they come under commercial aviation. And the work that I'm conducting is actually with a low-cost airline. I can't name the airline, but we are trying to create any kind of interventions in terms of tools and techniques that can help in planning and resource scheduling problems in commercial aviation. So there is a plethora of problem statements when it comes to aviation. And the best part of commercial aviation is you have a huge amount of data which is available to you in electronic form. And this makes it a very good space for us to try out different tools and techniques to create the best kinds of resource schedules. So the one specific topic that I am working on is called crew scheduling. So let me describe the problem to you. So when you are flying an aircraft, you are, when you are traveling as a passenger, you are just traveling in one flight and you reach a place and maybe you take a connecting flight. but you do reach home or you do reach your destination. But we never think of what happens to the crew, right? What do the crew do? So in aviation, commercial aviation, the crew generally is going to return to home base at the end of a trip. So they might take, let's say you have a Bombay-based crew, right? Mumbai-based crew. And this crew is going to take off in the morning. They might take a flight to Delhi. Then from Delhi, they might go to Guwahati. From Guwahati, they might go to Calcutta. They might go to Chennai, so on and so forth. They keep traveling. They keep flying the aircraft, or they keep, taking care of the passengers in the aircraft, right? And at the end of the trip, they will not land up in Chennai because this is Bombay crew. They have a home in Bombay. So they return to Bombay. Now, the question over here, or the complex question that we have over here is, what should be the series of flights that a crew should take? And like this, there will be many such crew who are going to be present for the, for the airline. There will be crew which is present in Bombay, Delhi, different home bases which are going to be present, many bases that are going to be possible. And they would want to know how many crew are required in order to fly these flights, or in order to take care of cabin crew requirements, any of these. And they would also want to design routes for each crew. So now this is a crew scheduling problem, which is designing routes for crew such that they return to home base at the end of the trip. This is possible if you have information of what kind of flights you're going to be having within your schedule. So let's say you have 1 month of flights available with you, or even 1 week of flights. And the airline has decided that they're going to have certain flights at certain timings. And you want to use this information to develop the crew routes. So this is a crew scheduling problem. Now, as you can think, this is a very complex problem because of several reasons. One is the fact that they have to return to the home base, right? So they can't just be left free. They have to return to home base. So this is like a constraint. This is what we call as constraints in optimization. The other is they cannot have very long waiting times between flights. It would mean very poor productivity for the crew. They cannot have very long trips. It would mean huge amount of crew fatigue. So when we have to consider all of this. Not only that, sometimes they may get a layover. That means they might have to stay at a hotel for the night and next day they have to take another flight. So in this case, there will be costs for the airline because they have to pay for their hotel, they have to pay for their to and fro transport from the airport, so on and so forth. And over and above this, they need to pay salary to the crew basis the number of flights that they take and the number of trips that they take. So from the company side, from the airline side, they would want to reduce these costs. And from the crew side, they would want to have trips that are not too long. And this is kind of a trade-off that we need to see when we create these crew schedules. And over and above this, we have commercial aviation rules and regulations, which the ministry comes up with, which are going to create additional constraints. That is, they would create constraints as to how many trips can someone do within a week, what is legally permissible. The government actually plays a role over here as well. So we need to adhere to all these rules and regulations as well. Now, what is going to happen here is when we try to develop a solution for this problem, we look at optimization techniques. This is what we call as a large scale optimization problem. There are many variables. The variables here represent the number of trips, okay, the number of possible trips that are going to be present, which in essence tell you how many crew are required. There are many possible variables or combinations. So a combination can consist of 2 flights. So, one of the common alternatives for the crew is he goes from Bombay to Delhi and then returns from Delhi to Bombay. So there are 2 flights in this. The other combination would be he goes from Bombay to Delhi, Delhi to Chennai, and then comes back to Bombay. So there are 3 flights over here. So now I have to choose between these 2 combinations. But like this, there are many combinations. There will be millions of combinations. So we need to choose between millions of such combinations, maybe 1,000. The best 1,000 we might need to choose, and we don't know how to do that. Similarly, you could have several constraints, thousands, 2,000 constraints, or so on and so forth. So this is what we call as a large scale optimization problem. So where we apply optimization techniques like mixed integer linear programming, so on and so forth. And we try to see whether we can combine this with machine learning algorithms like classification or clustering in order to see whether we can improve the speed of finding the best solution. So this is, the current kind of work that I'm looking at. It's a very interesting space. It's called combinatorial optimization. Like I said, you have to select from several combinations the optimal solution. So it's a combinatorial optimization problem where there are different ways. You can use heuristics, you can use a lot of algorithms and tools and techniques. And not only that, we need to be able to give these solutions in a low cost way. So we should not be using very expensive technology when you come up with these solutions. Traditionally, and this is an interesting field because traditionally these kinds of problems have been well developed as tools and techniques in the West. So these solutions are actually sold for huge amounts of money. And if you're working in India as a low-cost aviation airline, you would not want to buy such expensive tools and technologies. You would like to develop some solutions in-house. And that is where, these kinds of projects are looking at how do we develop low-cost technology solutions for problems like these in India, rather than relying upon, let's say, the US or France or Sweden for coming up with these tools and techniques. Can we do this, in India? And we have a research team here. I work with my students, my colleagues, and we work day and night. We don't sleep for days together. And we try to come up with solutions, work with the client. It's not an easy process. It's a huge learning process. It's not easy, but there are lots of interesting things to learn. And if you have, the passion for work like this, it's a very interesting space to be.
You have such a deep and conceptual understanding of how all these systems work and are interconnected. And it's really amazing. Your approach to using data science bridges both theory and industry because your work on research and projects applies to the real world. Can you share your experiences on working with academia?
Right. So I am an academician. I joined NITI as an academician. So I teach subjects over here at NITI, operations research, system dynamics, operations management, where we study concepts of inventory, aggregate planning, revenue management, and also supply chain management, logistics management. And, I've been with NITI for the last 7 years or so. So I have been in academics for the last 7 years. And originally speaking, to be honest, I was not really interested in teaching. I don't have that much patience. So it has been a test of my patience the last 2 years. And it has been quite an interesting journey, mainly because I have learned over the years that students are very, very innovative. They come up with very interesting solutions. And the role of academicians is basically to facilitate their journey. A lot of times what I have observed is most of the students are naturally very inquisitive. People are generally inquisitive. And the younger you are, the more you're able to absorb. So the role of an academician is actually to show them the direction that, why don't you look at this? You're looking at a problem which is not of interest to anyone. Why don't you look at this problem, which is of interest to everyone? And they come up with these unique and innovative approaches to address the problems. Sometimes they skip steps. I hate it when students skip steps. But I appreciate that they are trying to address the problem quickly and move on to the next thing. And these are interesting things that I have learned over the years. And at NITI, actually, I get a very good exposure to both academics as well as industry because we are located in the commercial capital of the country, Mumbai. And this is a very old institute. It was set up in 1963. So we have very good connect with the industry, mainly your FMCG industry like HUL, ITC, then Johnson & Johnson, and a lot of logistics companies, electronics companies, Amazon, so on and so forth. We have very regular interactions with them. They come here for placements and talks and also projects as such. So that's how we get access to projects and carrying out these interesting activities. So one of the useful parts, I would say, being in academics is one needs to be constantly, improving themselves, not just in terms of concepts, which, generally withstand the test of time, but also in terms of the kinds of practices that are prevalent. Because a lot of things change with respect to time in terms of behaviors. What I have understood over a period of time is I am a person in data science, but I really need to understand and appreciate the psychology of things, which is, the domain that you are working in. And this is very, very important. Understanding the psychology of consumers, understanding the psychology of employees, understanding the psychology of companies and organizations and how people work is very important because that determines the kind of decisions that they will take. And you need to work with that. You have to practically work with these decisions at the end of the day. And, that is also one of the, that's how a lot of cool innovations have happened in the past as well. Recent past, like Facebook and all, they came out of this understanding of how people network with each other and find connections. And this is something which is important even to this day when we try to understand new problems. So in academics, it's important, like I said, concepts are definitely there that need to be very robust, and there is still no end to improving oneself on concepts. But also you need to start understanding the practice very, very keenly. And that's where, I have the locational advantage of being able to connect with stakeholders on a regular basis. So, like I said, I was not initially interested in teaching, but now I'm interested a lot in teaching. In fact, I'm also looking at how can we do mass trainings of people within the logistics sector. It's become sort of a project of ours at NITI as well, where we are moving towards the, you might have heard of the Gati Shakti initiative, the PM Gati Shakti initiative, where they're trying to synergize between various ministries in order to create better logistics infrastructure for the country. And better logistics infrastructure means better economic development, right? So here, this is possible if we can train people and skill people properly. And skilling is a huge issue in India. There is no limit to which this skilling potential can actually be, improved to. And that has become somewhat of a pet initiative of mine as well, where I'm trying to look at how can we skill more people in very simple things also. Like suppose you need someone to learn how QR codes work or how to do scanning. This could be a very useful skill to have, and it can create an employment for you. You can get a job in some company if you just knew how to use a few technological applications and tools. If you know how to use a mobile, it's very useful, because then you can get a job in a place where electronic transactions happen. So this kind of skilling is very, very important. And what we need to see is how can we skill people at the bottom of the pyramid and then moving up, in the top tiers of the pyramid. A lot of skilling is happening. People are, going abroad, so on and so forth. But what's really missing is skilling people at the bottom of the pyramid and making them more, financially independent. What is happening now is they are still not financially independent because they're not skilled enough in the right kind of tools and techniques.
Finally, we'd love to know, is there anything you'd like to share with the audience? Any advice, experience, or stories? Whatever excites you or motivated you to be a leading woman in STEM.
So leading women in STEM, I don't know. I think that's a bit of a stretch. I am one of the women in STEM, and STEM needs a lot more women. Even at the workplace that I am, we have few women, and that is an issue when it comes to STEM as a field. And like you said, we do not, especially in academia, we do not have many leading women. Think of an IIT and tell me if you know if there is a lady director, right? So you will not find. And that is, in leadership positions, it's very difficult for women in STEM to actually come up. It's happening very well in the corporate world. I'm sure you've connected with a lot of them, and I'm sure we'll be seeing many of these speakers. But STEM is a very exciting field. I think it is a field that a lot of women should take up and not shy away from. It has been always something that I gravitated to because of my family. My father is a scientist. He's a retired scientist. So I naturally had this inclination and understanding that, this is a viable opportunity for me. But a lot of women do not have this kind of exposure. And it is very important, as women in STEM, that we give that kind of exposure to other women and encourage them to think outside of what they traditionally think as something that women should do. Either, not working, that is one option that, women choose or are forced to choose. Or the other option is they tend to go towards softer fields, which are good and no doubt about it. But STEM is also an opportunity that should not be missed out. And I feel that it should be integrated with any kind of discipline that they're working in, whether it's, let's say, psychology, organizational behavior, marketing, any kind of softer fields. Women should be taking up more, education in this domain. I have been very passionate about the field. I do like science and research a lot. I do like to spend long hours at trying to understand problems, trying to find the root cause and issues and trying to solve it. And, this is something that I like to motivate women to do as well. So I had, recently one of my students, she's completing her PhD, and I encouraged her to, work in the domain of ports management, green ports management. And this is a domain that is very, very up and coming for people to be working in. And how do we apply mathematical models and tools and techniques over here? And I see that it doesn't depend upon whether you're a man or woman to be researching these domains or working in these domains. It's just that there might be a bit of hesitation from women when it comes to taking it up as a career. They might think that, what if we progress too much? That's one of the things. It might affect other opportunities like marriage or settling down, so on and so forth. And this is something I think they need to get out of, because you have to focus on doing what you like the most. And STEM is a very, very interesting discipline to be. I think unlike, I really don't remember or recall anyone preventing me from taking up this field. So I have been lucky and, very privileged in that regard. I really, when I was preparing for this interview or even for the other interview, I was thinking of, is there really a sad story in my life to share regarding, my entry to STEM? And I don't have. And I think that could be a rarity, right? It's not necessary. There are many women who do not have that kind of privilege. And we should look at how we can encourage and inculcate more of scientific temper within women. And, it can lead them to very interesting pursuits. Think of Kalpana Chawla, I cannot recall someone, going from Punjab to a place like that and living her dreams practically. And we need to have more of such role models coming up within the tech space in India. And India is actually a very good place for coming up with the new tech startups. This is there everywhere. And, I'm also very privileged to be part of the IIM Women Alumni the community. We are a 6,000, 7,000 strong community of women who have graduated from the IIMs. And that is a very important support system for me. And I think we should look at developing support systems for women as well, creating mentorship, mentoring other women, helping them, because women do have different challenges when you move up the ladder, and you also, when you progress in life, you have other challenges that you need to deal with, like family, travel, so on and so forth. And you need to know how to juggle all of this. You should not shy away from juggling this as well. You shouldn't get worried that, oh, this is something that's happening. This happens to everyone. So we need to understand everyone has their own set of challenges at home, challenges in the society, and we need to see how we can work with this and still keep our hopes and aspirations and passion for STEM, intact. So it's important, and I think this is quite a passion of mine. In fact, even a few years back, I was looking at this field of logistics and supply chain, and I realized we don't have enough women in this field. And so we started looking at the role of women in logistics, and we saw that we don't have enough women in the manufacturing sector. You have huge attrition of women in the logistics sector, because after a point in time, or even in the initial days, you need to, let's say you have to travel in trucks, work with truck drivers, and work with people on the ground. And this might not be a very safe space for women to work in. And these are some of the challenges that we started observing. So we need to work with the government and policy makers to create safe spaces also for women to work in when it comes to fields like STEM and more on the field kind of jobs. And a lot of companies are doing this. I see a lot of companies trying to build. There are companies which have done, which have made factories in which these are completely run by women, including your security guards, including them. It is completely run by women, and it's not something that's impossible. So I think we should be looking at inculcating more inclusive and safe spaces for women to work in when it comes to STEM. And there's a lot of growth opportunity for this in India.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing these wonderful insights with all of us here at the Women in Data Science Ashoka 2022. I personally had a great time, and I've learned so much from this interview. So I just wanted to thank you so much for coming and sharing all this with us.
Thank you, Arundhati. It was very nice interacting with you. It's nice to see someone so young, taking up such an opportunity And it's very nice and encouraging to see that you are also working towards this domain of bringing more women in the field. So it's very nice to see that. So really congratulations to you also in that way. And thank you, Ritu, for inviting me for this, this forum. It's very important, and we have to keep this conversation going.